Hi there. So, continuing my research into Martinism, um, it seems to me that the system nowadays has become incredibly complicated. Um, of course, there is a tendency now to unite the three threads of Martinism, as it were, the theurgy, the intellectualism of de Saint Martin, and the Freemasonry side, the chivalric side, the degrees of chivalry on the training of the Christian chivalry. But and nowadays, of course, combining these three, you do have an incredible system that's possible to emerge from it. Um, but originally I kind of thought this is too complicated. I mean, really, the base, the whole nub of the thing is soul awareness. Soul comes down into the lower worlds from the higher, uh, quotation marks. I don't know whether they're higher or lower really. And then there's the great return, and that return is inevitable. It's just that if you want to partake of the consciousness of that return, or partake consciously of that return, as might be better, when the soul reaches the nadir, the really bottom of this pit, as it were, that's being formed around it, then it is possible to enter into the return consciously by carrying out a simple breathing exercise, what I call the circle of breath. And from that breath, you go into the silence of meditation, and from there, what may happen, but it's not guaranteed, is that a voice will emerge, and the information given to you by that voice, perhaps even accompanied by certain images, especially of the Holy Grail, will enable you to experience gnosis on a deep level, which will, as I said, enable you to consciously partake of the return of the soul to the higher realms, or to the realm of the true God, having sojourned in the realm of the demiurge um, for a certain amount of time, if time can be. I don't know if time can enter into this. Well, of course it can, but so you descend into the realm of the demiurge, and then you ascend to the realm of the true God. And perhaps this is not merely a descent or an ascent, but a spiral down and a spiral back up again. There are different models, I suppose. But the point is that the gnosis itself can be, you prepare yourself. I think we've decided you prepare yourself for the possibility of gnosis by going into the breathing, the breath awareness, and from there into the meditation or introspection, as I call it. And possibly then you might experience images, certain images, which don't need to have a particular meaning, but they do it to you unconsciously. And then you may experience either a sense of gnosis, or a voice of the silence, as Blavatsky called it, and that is a cycle which you can set up in your mind, and then having reached gnosis, having reached soul awareness, of course the trick is to be able to jump into soul awareness from any state of consciousness, you know, in any circumstance, of course, and to have that possibility of soul awareness in any situation, and that, I suppose, is the hard bit. So you take, in remembrance of me, said Christ. You partake of the Eucharist. So in remembrance of the experience of gnosis, you go back out into the world, and applying the remembrance of gnosis to your everyday situation will enable you to build that rainbow bridge, as it were, that will carry you back to the Godhead consciously. And because it will happen with or without you, but it's good to be with it rather than without it. So you go within instead of going without, basically. And I would have thought that's the nub of it, really. That's the simplicity. And I'm not quite sure why you need 33 degrees or 97 degrees or even 3 degrees or 4 degrees or even inner degrees of that, of the fourth and so forth, fifth and sixth degrees of initiation. I mean, so as Stefan Heuler said, initiation means to begin. So all one can say is that you have 33 beginnings, you have 97 beginnings, you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 degrees of beginnings. And perhaps, but that's what you do have in life. You begin and you begin again, perhaps at different stages. And there are all these things that have been begun in your mind that one day will take root. By their fruits shall ye know them. So that you begin a lot of different things all at the same time, or even sequentially, and then eventually you will get the results that are part of the result, which is soul awareness. But I can't help thinking, that. And of course, some people use the mantra, the bija mantra, the seed mantra, which, for example, Hugh, and some, and it's said that you can vibrate the sacred word Hugh, which means soul awareness, really, in any situation, and that will make you jump into soul awareness automatically, and eventually at death. You will jump into permanent soul awareness, you see. But there are many, many different begin. I suppose there are different things you have to begin, but it seems to me very, very complex. All this complexity, and maybe this complexity implodes into simplicity eventually. But I was wondering whether I was a bit too harsh on the idea of complexity. In harsh in sort of condemning it, and sort of devaluing it, as it were. Because I suppose, you see, the thing is that if you start off with meditation, and Crowley has this in his Magic Part 4, the first book, Part 1, which is mysticism, when he talks about the fact that, there are many different stages of meditation. I mean, you might start off okay, but then it sort of flattens out, and then it gets more difficult, and then it flattens out again. And then it gets more. You have like stages of success, and stages of failure in quotation marks. When for some reason the mind becomes incredibly resistant to further progress. And certainly, you get this with playing an instrument. You get sort of milestones, but you also get a lot of plateaus where no progress is made at all. But I mean, but then you talk about society of friends and the simplicity again of just simple breath awareness and introspection. You don't have to have stages of meditation, of samadhi or trance, and you get more and more sort of good at samadhi, or you get more refined samadhi, samadhi. You don't. There's no need to go into that sort of idea that there are sort of stages and more refined versions of the same thing. It is or it isn't. Either you're in meditation or you're not. I can't see that there's necessary. I don't think it's the same thing as running a 4 minute mile or learning to play the piano. I think it's a bit different, a bit simpler than that, really. But a lot of people will tell me it isn't. And of course, it's possible to think that you're meditating or think that you're listening to the voice of the silence, when in fact you're not. It's possible that your ego, or the part of you which is connected to the demiurge, will make you think that you're experiencing gnosis when in fact you're not. But then to say that is surely to become rather sort of paranoid about it, and sets up a dualism which shouldn't be there. Soul awareness, there is no dualism in soul awareness. Surely you're either soul aware or you're not soul aware. But it is possible, some say, for the ego to create facsimiles of soul awareness which are false. And in that case, I suppose it does become crucial to go through various initiatory degrees in order to, in order to reduce the power of the ego to create facsimiles of soul awareness. And not only that, it seems to me that you also need some, complexity for the mind. You leave the mind to gnaw on all the complexity of the different Masonic degrees, and it gnaws away at these degrees and all the information, and whilst it's doing that, you kind of sneak around behind the ego, and achieve soul awareness whilst it is wondering, what's going on at the 15th degree. So it's a sort of like a trick, really. It's a mental trick to keep the mind occupied on I don't know, sigils and symbols and mantras and grips and mudras and rupas even and rituals. The mind is quite happy, playing with these things like a child. But the more mature side of you continues with its meditation and continues to attain soul awareness. Whilst all the rest of the parts of you which are false are all dealing with all the sort of complexity of the initiatory process. I don't know. I just feel. I've always disliked complexity. Maybe because I'm a very lazy person, so I don't really. I'm not really into learning. I have learnt Kabbalah and learnt magic and stuff like that, but I've always felt it was so complicated, and all I really want to do is to just sit in a chair and close my eyes and go into the breath awareness and just await developments. Without, as Crowley said, lust of result, without trying to want anything, without trying to force anything to happen, without trying to conjure the soul as if it was some kind of sort of spirit in a triangle or something like that, which soul is definitely not. You just sort of be peaceful, and if, at the very least, you just relax. You might not get any voice, or you might not get any symbol, or you might not get anything at all. You just get relaxation, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. So it's not about attainment. It's not about going after the glittering prizes of initiation. It's something much simpler than that. But even Stefan Euler likes his robes and his regalia and his symbols and all that kind of stuff. Which I've worn the robes as well and done the rituals. It's all very exciting. And as I said, it's all I suppose. The mind likes to be excited by things, but I've always found rituals to be awfully distracting, actually, because I'm not at all a practical person, so I don't even like dressing up, really. I just like being in the clothes that I am and just, settling down to an evening's introspection, um, without going into all the bother of lighting candles and incense and doing rituals and putting circles on the floor and doing all that. I don't know. I just, it's not for me. But perhaps it's very useful for other people to do that. And they have to get into complexity, because otherwise, if it's too simple, they'll just say, "Oh, well, this is too simple for me. I'll just give up." Perhaps just quietude is too boring for people, really, and they want excitement. They want drama, and they want lights and angels and wings and gold letters and stuff appearing on the walls. And I don't know. Perhaps people need that. But I just thought it was, it's dreadfully tedious, really. I've had things happen like that, but I always thought this is a bit tedious, really, all this Enochian stuff. It's sort of, do we have to do this? Should we? We're just after soul awareness. That's it. And you could attain soul awareness by whilst washing the floor. I mean, who knows? When soul awareness will happen. It's like the return of Jesus. I mean, who knows how it'll happen or when it will happen? It'll happen and it'll happen. It happens when it happens, and you'll know about it. So you're just there, washing the floor one day, and and your own revelation happens, your own apocalypse happens, your own Jesus comes to you. The Holy Spirit descends upon you at that very moment, and you didn't do any magical ritual to summon the Holy Spirit, a concept which I'm very suspicious of and I don't like at all. I mean, how can you summon Jesus and summon the Holy Spirit? They're not like the genie. They're not like the jinn. You can't just summon these celestial creatures because they'll be coming from the demiurge. You'd be summoning them. You would be summoning them from the very source which is distracting you and imprisoning your soul and keeping you from soul awareness, it seems to me. So I don't think that Jesus and the Holy Spirit or the Holy Grails have anything to do with being summoned. You don't summon them, they summon you. They invite you, you don't invite them. But you do prepare yourself, perhaps, sometimes during the day by going into introspection, going into quietude and breath awareness, possibly. And sometimes, you could also be doing these things whilst you're washing the floor, but not necessarily. There'll be no connection between doing the meditation and having something happen. You're not making anything happen. You're not directing the energy. You're not making something happen. You're just preparing yourself for the day if and when something happens. Okay, but who knows? Who knows? Who can tell? And who can tell another person's experience of gnosis? And they can probably hardly or at all put it into words. So it's no good sort of going to somebody and saying what is gnosis, because they can't tell you what your gnosis is. They can only tell you, well, perhaps they can't even tell you what their gnosis is. Perhaps they have had it, perhaps they haven't. Most likely they don't want to talk about it. It's too private to talk about. So I don't know where this leaves my relationship to Martinism, quite really. I would prefer a very simple version of Martinism, based on the essential core doctrine of de Saint-Martin, really. And perhaps Martinism, a bit like the Golden Dawn, is too complex for me. And even solar, and other initiatory mystery schools with their complexity, They are far too complex for me as well. And having spent many years thinking in a complicated way, I now feel myself ready to think in a very simple way, or perhaps not even to think at all, actually, but to achieve what Austin Spare called vacuity, which is the sort of like the Zen silence in the middle, and at the center there's this soft sort of liquid diamond center, which is silence, which is darkness. But a lot of people are quite frightened of going there directly. I remember being doing a Tibetan meditation many years ago, and they hit this gong, and they said follow the sound of the gong. Well, I did, but then this big sort of void opened up, big sort of darkness, and I was too afraid to go into it, to be perfectly honest. I was young, and and I didn't like the idea of silence and darkness and nothing happening. I wanted loads of things to happen in my life, and I wasn't ready to go into that void at all. So perhaps in that case, you have to have lots of drama and degrees and initiations and gurus and robes and incense and I don't know what all, simply to keep you sort of entertained, as it were. And then eventually, your mind gets, well, I'm fed up with this. Maybe will jump into that darkness and that void after all. So perhaps that's the function of all this spiritual complexity and intellectualism and theurgy and all that, and invocation and evocation. Perhaps it's all, perhaps the idea of it eventually one day you just say, I'm fed up with all this. I just want to flick a switch, and soul awareness. It comes into my life like that. So I think the answer is it depends on the individual, really. And I suppose you can't make hard and fast rules about individuals. I can't recommend this path to you or that path. Suck it and see. Try out lots of different paths and see what works for you, really. Which I know is a little bit of a hippie kind of thing to say, but it's probably the wisest thing that anyone could say to you. Is do whatever is true to yourself.